with silver spot price moving so fast and so quickly in both directions, it's really hard to pull the trigger on any type of bullion right now. I find myself looking at, do I buy higher premium stuff? Do I buy generics? Now, again, a stacker is going to say you always stick with the cheapest silver you can get your hands on. That's kind of in general, when buying, that's always nice. It's always nice to have that diversity, especially the real generic stuff like these guys that are easily replaceable. The harder thing is things like still generic bullion, but somewhat collectible, like the Engelhard rounds, that kind of thing. It's a little harder to pull the trigger on those because premiums still aren't great. I was looking at these guys, the Royal Canadian Mint bars, and thinking, okay, maybe I just, stick with 10 ounce or even kilo if the price was right. And these guys, they wanted close to $600 for, the Royal Canadian Mint 10 ounce. Now, Royal Canadian Mint isn't necessarily the cheapest generic bars, but they are bullion bars, right? I mean, they're serialized, they're good looking pieces, but is it enough to really, overpay, if you will, especially by close to that amount? Probably not. So in this environment of moving prices, like, where is your money going? I would say, honestly, like, if you look back over the last year, gold has really kind of been very stable. And so there's not as much, even though, currently it's at a very nice price level, it's not really, as hard of a purchase as silver is, because there's not as much movement. Also, gold in general is just far more recognizable than silver. The hard part is not everybody has the money to be able to, pull the trigger. And even if you do, when you're thinking about it and you can get a few ounces of silver for the same price that it's going to cost you to get a tenth of gold, it just doesn't, for a lot of stackers, it doesn't, it doesn't satisfy the way that silver does, which is kind of crazy, right? Who wouldn't choose, something that's, potentially a little bit higher price, or at least premium saving than gold? It's crazy. So it's crazy to think about actually what that would mean over the longer term if you're buying over a long period of time. But again, even the generic stuff is pretty expensive. So it's hard to see where in silver the best kind of place to be as far as purchases is. I think longer term, what I'm going to start doing is trading up some of the silver positions I have for gold. That's going to obviously make it much more compact, much more, easy to transfer should I decide to. But also, I think price-wise, much less volatility in, gold than there is in comparable value of silver. So I think it just makes sense from both aspects why you would want to hold one versus the others. It's just a better overall buy to have something like gold, which is much more stable. Now, again, other things like SHTF, the case could be made that smaller denomination silver is going to be a better buy, but is that really likely at this point? Every time that we go through a year like last year, it always seems like, oh, this is it, this is going to be the end, and then things just go back to normal. It kind of seems like that's what's happening. And so, again, it just makes it harder and harder to pull the trigger on silver when there's so much movement. There's no right time. And the thing is that, the other hard part with it is I find myself looking at like gold Libertads, the reverse proof gold Libertads, purse stuff, just nicer stuff to kind of, satisfy the craving to stack. But then I sit there and look at it and I'm like, do I really want to pay the outrageous premiums? And I don't. And that's hard because it really is a detractor from, purchasing gold and silver when the premiums are that high. It just doesn't make sense. Now, of course, everybody's got to make money in silver production, right? The miner, the refiner, the third party that sells it to you. Everybody's got to make a cut. I get it, but buying bullion, especially in a falling price environment, which, price has come down from the peak that we saw earlier in the year, it just gets less and less attractive and harder to justify that high premium. So my question to you, where are you going? What are you looking at? What are you seeing? Again, is it generic that stands the test of time, tried and true? Or is it smaller purchases, but of nicer stuff?